My name is Nora Ellen Whitfield. I am 28 years old, and my sister stood in a hospital hallway on the night of my 25th birthday pretending she could not breathe, while I sat in an empty restaurant watching my entree go cold. Actually, that is not where it started. Let me go back. No, wait, that is not right either. Because I keep wanting to start in the middle in the part of the story that makes me look like I handled it well, and if I am going to tell this the right way, I have to start at the beginning, which is embarrassing because the beginning involves me believing her. For a long time. Longer than I want to say. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories. This is where we share real life inspired tales of family conflict, betrayal, and the quiet strength it takes to stand your ground. If these stories speak to you, drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. Okay, the beginnings. I grew up in a house in Asheville, North Carolina, the kind of house that sits back from the street behind a row of arborvitae and looks from the outside like a house where everyone is reasonable. Two parents, two daughters. My parents are Gordon and Patricia Whitfield. My father sold commercial HVAC systems for 31 years, and my mother taught fourth grade at Ira B. Jones Elementary for 22 of them. They are not bad people. I want to say that now before I say everything else. They are not bad people. They are people who made a decision a long time ago, maybe before they were even conscious of making it, that my sister Delaney was fragile and that protecting her fragility was more important than being fair. That decision calcified over 20-something years into something they could not even see anymore. It was just the shape of our family. You do not question the shape of things you have lived inside your whole life. Delaney is 2 years older than me. She is 30 years old now. She has her mother's dark hair, which is also my mother's dark hair, which is also my hair, but on Delaney it always looked more intentional somehow, even when she had just rolled out of bed. She has this quality that I spent a lot of years trying to name and could never quite get right. The closest I can get is this: she walks into any room assuming that she is the most interesting thing in it, and somehow, because she assumes it so completely, she usually becomes true, not because she is always interesting, but because she believes it so thoroughly that everyone around her adjusts. I am a different kind of person. I am the kind of person who makes a list before I go to the grocery store and sticks to it. I am the kind of person who reads the fine print on lease agreements. I am the kind of person who, if you ask me how I am doing, will actually think about it before I answer. I am a logistics coordinator at Mission Health in Asheville, which means I spend my days tracking supply chains, managing vendor contracts, and solving problems quietly before they become problems anyone else has to see. I have been doing that job for 4 years, and I am good at it in the way that people who are never described as magnetic are good at things, which is consistently, reliably, without anyone making much of a fuss. I am telling you this because it matters. Because the story I am about to tell you is a story about being good at something no one notices, and being overlooked by people who should not have overlooked you, and what it costs you over time, and what it costs you all at once on a specific Thursday night in October when you are sitting at a table for six, and there are only two of you there. But I am getting ahead of myself again. Let me tell it in order, except that I cannot tell it in order because the way I found out the truth was not in order. It was in pieces. Some pieces came 3 years later. One piece came last spring, which is only 5 months ago, and it changed the shape of everything I had already put away. So I will tell it the way I actually know it, which is messy, and I will try to catch myself when I get it wrong. Here is the version I believed for a long time. My 25th birthday was October 14th, 2021. I had reserved a table at Curate, which is a Spanish tapas restaurant on Biltmore Avenue that I had been wanting to go to for almost 2 years. The reservation was for 6 people, 7 o'clock. I made it 6 weeks in advance because that is the kind of restaurant where you make it 6 weeks in advance. I had my college roommate Bex coming and her husband Travis, and my friend Jill from work, and my parents and Delaney. Delaney called my mother at 6:42. My mother was already in the parking garage 3 blocks away. My father was with her. Delaney said she was having chest pains and trouble breathing and she was scared. My mother called me at 6:44 while I was standing at the bar at Curate waiting for everyone to arrive, and she said, "Nora, honey, I am so sorry, Delaney is not well. We think she might be having a panic attack. Your father and I have to go check on her." She sounded really frightened. And I said, "Okay," I said, "Of course," I said, "Let me know how she is." I stood at that bar for another 4 minutes before I walked to our table, where Bex and Travis were already seated and looking at the menus. And I sat down and I put my napkin in my lap, and Bex said, "Where is everyone?" And I said, "My parents had to go to Delaney." and Bex looked at Travis and Travis looked at his menu and nobody said anything for a moment. Jill texted at 6:58 that she was parking. She sat down and looked around and I explained again and she said, "Oh gosh, is Delaney okay?" And I said, "I think so." We ate dinner, the three of them and me. The food was very good. The croquettes de jamon were the best thing I had ever eaten, and I registered that thought with a kind of flat neutrality, the way you notice something beautiful when you are also noticing that you are alone in a way you did not expect to be. My parents sent a text at 7:23 that said, "Delaney is feeling better, so relieved, sorry we missed the reservation, can we do breakfast tomorrow?" Delaney did not text me at all that night. That is the version I believed. My sister had a panic attack, my parents went to be with her. My birthday dinner happened without my family. These things happen, families have emergencies. You cannot blame someone for having a panic attack. Except, okay, here is where I have to stop and catch myself, because I just told you the version I believed for about a year and a half, and I need to be honest about what I also noticed in real time that I did not let myself look at directly. I noticed that Delaney had called my mother and not me. If you're scared and struggling to breathe, you call the person you are closest to, that is your mother, that makes sense. Except Delaney's apartment was 12 minutes from Curate. If she had been home and actually frightened, the faster move would have been to call 911, which is what you do when you think you might be having a cardiac event. She did not call 911. She called my mother, who was in a parking garage 3 blocks away, 6 minutes before I was supposed to sit down for my birthday dinner. I noticed that. I set it down in the back of my head and I did not pick it up again. For 18 months. We did breakfast the next morning, the four of us, at a place on Merriman Avenue called Early Girl Eatery. My parents sat across from me and my father had the scrambled eggs and my mother had the avocado toast and they both said, "What a scare," and Delaney was so sorry and she wanted to be there, you know how she gets. And I said I know and I ate my grits and I watched a cardinal land on the windowsill outside and I thought, you drove 3 blocks to her apartment instead of walking into the restaurant and sitting down with me. I thought that I did not say it. The cardinal sat there for a while and then it left. Delaney texted me 2 days later. She said, "Nora, I am so sorry about your birthday. Being sick on that exact night was the worst timing. Can I take you to lunch this week?" And I said, "Sure," and we went to lunch. And she was warm and funny and she asked about my job and she ordered us dessert without asking if I wanted it, which is something she has always done, just assumed I want whatever she wants, and I ate the chocolate thing and I was fine. I was completely fine. I had filed it. Now, here is where the story fractures, because I need to tell you two things that happened at different times, and they change the shape of each other, and I am going to try to tell them in the order I learned them, not the order they happened, because that is the only way it makes sense. The first thing happened in March of 2023, 18 months after my birthday. I was helping my mother clean out a closet in my childhood bedroom because my parents were finally converting it to a proper guest room after years of leaving it as a time capsule. There were boxes of things. Old school projects, clothes I had left behind, a box of art supplies from a watercolor phase I had in college, and there was a shoebox on the top shelf that I pulled down because I thought it was mine. It was not mine. It was full of birthday cards, dozens of them going back years, cards to Delaney, and tucked inside the box between a card from our Aunt Fran and a card from my grandmother Opal, there was a folded piece of paper. A piece of paper I recognized immediately because it was from the notepad my mother kept by the kitchen phone, the one with the little roosters across the top. I stood on the stepladder holding that piece of paper for what felt like a very long time. It was a note in my mother's handwriting. It said, "D, this is the plan for Thursday. Dad and I park at the Rankin garage at 6:30. You call at 6:45. We come to you. 30 minutes, then we say Nora will understand. She always does. Dinner can go forward. We will come in for dessert. Dinner, yes. Parking garage close. Should work. She will be fine." I read it twice. Then I read it a third time, slowly, the way I read vendor contracts when something is wrong and I am trying to locate exactly where the wrong thing is. She will be fine. She will be fine. I stood on that stepladder in my childhood bedroom with a piece of paper in my hand for what I think was about 4 minutes. I know it was around 4 minutes because I had put on a podcast before I started cleaning, and I remember being about 4 minutes past the timestamp I had noticed before I climbed up. My mother was in the hallway doing something with a linen closet. I could hear her. She was humming something I could not identify. I thought I could take this downstairs right now. I thought I could unfold it on the kitchen table and ask her to read it out loud. I thought she would cry. I thought my father would say now Patricia and he would mean both of us. He always means both of us when he says that. I thought Delaney would find out I found it and she would call me and she would have an explanation. She always has an explanation. She is extraordinarily good at explanations. They are detailed and emotionally coherent, and they arrive with this look on her face like she is the one who has been hurt by the misunderstanding. I folded the piece of paper, I put it in the back pocket of my jeans, I put the shoebox back on the shelf, I climbed down the stepladder. My mother came into the room with a stack of towels and said, "How is it going in here?" And I said, "Almost done. I think most of this can go to Goodwill." And my mother looked at the boxes and said, "That watercolor set might be worth keeping," and I said, "I will think about it." I drove home with the note in my pocket. I put it in the inside zipper pocket of the black laptop bag I carry every day so that it would be with me always and I would not have to decide what to do with it immediately. I have been making that same decision for 2 years. The note is still there. Now the second thing. This is the part that happened 5 months ago, and this is the part that I have been not quite ready to say out loud because once I say it, the whole shape of the story changes and I cannot put it back. My cousin Terry got married in April. Terry is my father's brother's daughter. She is 33 and she got married at a vineyard outside of Hendersonville called Mark Tree, which is 40 minutes from Asheville on a good day and about an hour on a Saturday in April. Beautiful venue, string lights, the kind of wedding where everyone cries a little and does not feel embarrassed about it. Delaney was there, all of us were there. At the reception after the dinner, I was standing near the bar getting a glass of water, and I heard two of my cousins talking nearby. Two of my father's nieces from the Greensboro branch of the family, Mandy and Courtney. They are both in their late 30s. I have known them my whole life, but we are not close. We see each other at events like this and we catch up, and it is warm, but it is not deep. I was not trying to hear them. I want to be clear about that. I was standing maybe 8 feet away getting a glass of water, and the tent was loud with music and people, but the bar area had a brief quiet pocket because everyone was on the dance floor and their voices carried. Mandy said, "I still cannot believe that about Nora's birthday." Courtney said, "I know, your aunt told me at Christmas, I felt so bad." Mandy said, "And it worked, that is the thing, it actually worked." Patricia and Gordon left the garage and went straight to Delaney's. They did not even go in to say happy birthday. Courtney said, "I mean, they felt terrible." Mandy said they should have felt terrible. She had been planning that dinner for weeks. Then someone came and grabbed Courtney's arm and pulled her toward the dance floor, and that conversation ended. I stood at the bar with my glass of water and I thought, your aunt told me at Christmas. My mother told someone this story. She told it to her sister-in-law at Christmas, which means at some point in the past several years she sat in someone's living room and told the story of what happened on October 14th, 2021, and the version she told included enough detail that Mandy had pieced together what really happened or had been told outright or something in between. My mother knew. That is what I had not let myself go all the way to, even after I found the note. I had held the note in my head as something that could still be interpreted, as something that maybe had an explanation I had not thought of yet, as something I might have misread. After the wedding, sitting in my car in the parking area with the gravel under my tires and the string lights still glowing through the tent wall, I took the note out of my laptop bag and I read it again. She will be fine. My mother wrote those words about me. My mother sat down with a pen and wrote out a plan with a timeline with logistics, with a parking garage name, and at the end of it she wrote, "She will be fine," which means she knew I would not be fine, and she wrote it anyway as a thing to tell herself. I sat in that car for a long time. I did not cry, which surprised me a little. I thought I was going to cry. Instead, I had this sensation across my chest, not pain exactly, but a kind of spreading pressure, like something expanding in a space that was not quite big enough for it. I breathed through it. I watched a couple I did not know walk to their car with their shoes in their hands, laughing at something. I watched them drive away. Here is what I need to tell you before I go further about what this cost. I am not a person who falls apart easily, and I want to make sure I am being honest about what I mean by that because it sounds like a good thing and I am not entirely sure it is. What I mean is that I have spent a long time being the person in my family who handles things. Not because I was asked to be exactly, because the space was available and I am the kind of person who fills available space. When my grandmother Opal had her knee surgery in 2019 and my mother was managing Delaney through some kind of crisis I never got the full story on, I was the one who coordinated Opal's home care, spoke with the physical therapy office, made sure the prescriptions were called in correctly. When my father had a billing dispute with Buncombe County over his business taxes in 2020, I was the one who sat down with the documents and found the error and wrote the letter. Nobody asked me to do these things, I just did them. And nobody said, Nora, you are the person we count on, the way they said it to Delaney when she was in a bad patch and needed everyone to circle around her. They just let me do what I did and they expected me to keep doing it and they did not think to ask if it cost me anything. That is a kind of invisible, the kind that sneaks up on you. I want to say something here that I am not sure how to say because it involves being fair to people who have not been entirely fair to me, and fairness is important to me even when it is uncomfortable. My parents love me, I believe that. I believe they love me in the way that parents love children they are not worried about, which is a different kind of love than the love they have for Delaney, who they are always a little worried about, who has always seemed to them like something that might break. I do not think they consciously decided that Delaney mattered more. I think they decided a long time ago that she was more fragile, and that decision lived in their bodies so deeply that by the time I was 25 it had become reflex. She called, they went. It did not occur to them that going was a choice. They thought it was the only option. She will be fine was not cruelty. It was a shortcut around a guilt they could not afford to sit with. That does not mean it was okay. Those two things are both true. I have been sitting with both of them for almost 3 years. Okay, I got ahead of myself again. I went to the wedding and I heard Mandy and Courtney and I sat in my car and that all happened 5 months ago and I said it changed everything and it did, but not in the way I expected. What it changed was not what I did, what it changed was what I stopped doing. I had been managing a particular kind of silence with my family for years, not a hostile silence, a careful one. The kind of silence where you show up to every birthday, every holiday, every early girl eatery breakfast, and you are warm and you are present and you contribute to the conversation and you do not ask the questions that are sitting right there in your chest, ticking quietly like something with a small battery in it. I had been running that silence so well and for so long that I had started to think it was fine. It had started to feel like its own kind of peace. It was not its own kind of peace. After the wedding, I went home and I sat down at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, which is something I do when I need to think through something that is too complicated for my head alone, and I wrote down everything I knew. I wrote down the night of October 14th, 2021. I wrote down what my mother had said on the phone at 6:44. I wrote down the breakfast at Early Girl Eatery. I wrote down the shoebox. I wrote down the note word for word from memory, though I had the note in my bag and I could have looked at it. I wrote down the wedding and Mandy's voice through the tent. I wrote down, your aunt told me at Christmas. I looked at what I had written and I thought, what do I actually want? Not what do I want to happen, not what do I want them to say. What do I, Nora Ellen Whitfield, logistics coordinator, 37 pages of notes, 3 years of careful silence, what do I actually want out of this? And I sat with that question for a long time because the honest answer kept slipping away from me every time I tried to grab it. The honest answer was not that I wanted an apology, though I did want an apology. The honest answer was not that I wanted them to understand what they had done, though I wanted that too. The honest answer was something quieter and harder, which was this: I wanted to stop pretending. I had been pretending for 3 years that the night of my 25th birthday was just a thing that happened, just a missed dinner, just an unfortunate coincidence of bad timing, and I was tired of pretending. And I did not know how to stop pretending without blowing up something that I did not actually want to blow up. This is the part of the story where someone is supposed to tell me what to do. In movies, there is a wise friend, or a therapist, or a mentor figure who says the thing that cuts through. What I had was Bex, who was the only person I had ever told the full version to, and what Bex said when I called her from my kitchen table at 9:30 on a Sunday night was, Nora, she said it in that voice she uses when she is choosing her words, you have been carrying this by yourself for a long time and you are going to keep carrying it until you decide you are done. And I said, what does done look like? And she was quiet for a second and then she said, I think you already know. I did already know. I had known for a while. I just kept moving the decision forward 1 month at a time, the way you move a hard work task to the next week's calendar because it requires a kind of energy you do not have right now. I decided to talk to my mother. Not my father, not Delaney, my mother. Because the note was in my mother's handwriting, and whatever my sister had done to set this in motion, whatever she had said or suggested or orchestrated, my mother had picked up a pen and written it down, and she was the one who told the story to Patty Whitfield at Christmas. and she was the one I needed to sit across from. I called her on a Tuesday in May. I asked if I could come by on Saturday morning. She said, "Of course, are you all right?" I said, "I am fine, I just want to talk." There was a brief pause and then she said, "Should your father be home?" And I thought about that and I said, "Yes, I want him there too." The drive from my apartment to my parents' house is 11 minutes on the regular route and 14 if I take Merriman, and I took Merriman that Saturday because I needed the extra 3 minutes. I pulled up in front of the house with its arborvitae and sat in the car for a moment. The note was in my jacket pocket, which was not where I usually kept it, but I had moved it that morning because I wanted it on my body, not in my bag. I do not entirely know why, I just needed it closer. My father opened the door before I knocked. He had seen me pull up. He said, "Hey kiddo," and I said, "Hey dad," and I came inside and my mother was in the kitchen and the coffee was already made and there was a plate of sliced banana bread on the table. My mother makes banana bread when she is nervous. She has done this my entire life. I stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at the banana bread and thought she knew this was not a regular visit. We sat down. I had the note in my pockets. I put my coffee cup on the table and I wrapped both hands around it and I looked at them. I said, "I need to tell you what I found in Delaney's shoebox." My mother's face changed, not dramatically, just a small shift like something settling. I said I found it when we were cleaning out my old room. I said, "I have had it for 2 years and I have been trying to decide what to do with it, and I think I have been waiting for it to stop mattering and it has not stopped mattering." My father said, "What is it?" I took the note out of my pocket and unfolded it on the table between us. I did not slide it toward them. I just unfolded it and left it there. My mother looked at it. She looked at it for a long time. She did not pick it up. My father leaned forward and read it and then sat back. He pressed 2 fingers to his mouth. I said, "I also need to tell you what I heard at Terry's wedding." And I told them about Mandy and Courtney and the 8 feet of quiet space near the bar and what Mandy had said about what my mother had told Patty at Christmas. My mother was quiet. She had both hands in her lap and she was looking at the note on the table. I said, "I am not here to fight. I am not here to punish anyone. But I need you to understand that I know what happened and I have known for 2 years and I am tired of pretending." My father said, "Nora." I said, "Dad, please let me finish." He stopped. I said I spent my 25th birthday at a table for 6 with 2 friends and an empty chair where my family was supposed to be, and I told myself it was an emergency because that is what I was told, and I believed it because I love you and because I wanted to believe it and because I have spent my entire life being the one who is fine. I said I am not asking you to choose. I am not asking you to be angry at Delaney. I am asking you to say out loud to me that you know what happened. Just that, I need to hear it said. The kitchen was very quiet. The refrigerator made a sound. My mother picked up the note, she held it, she did not look at me. She said, "I am so sorry, Nora." She said it quietly, not like a speech, like something that had been stuck somewhere for a long time and finally came loose. My father said I did not know about the note. He said it in the voice he uses when he is being careful about being accurate. He said, "I knew she had called and I went with your mother because she was upset and I thought Nora will understand." He stopped. He said, "I have thought about that night more than you know." I believed him about not knowing about the note. I do not know if he knew more than he said about what Delaney had set up, and I decided that morning that it did not matter, that I was not there to adjudicate every layer of the thing. I was there for one thing and I had gotten it. My mother was still holding the note. I said, "You can keep that if you want." She folded it carefully and set it on the table and pushed it back toward me. She said, "You should have it." I took it. We sat there for a while. The banana bread sat on the plate and nobody ate any of it. My father refilled his coffee. My mother looked out the window at the backyard and I did not know what she was seeing, but she looked like someone who was looking at something that hurt a little. I said, "I love you both." I said, "I am not going anywhere." I said, "I just needed to not be the only person in the room who knew." My father said, "We should have been there." I said, "Yes." We did not talk about Delaney that morning. I did not go to her apartment after, did not call her. That conversation, if it ever happens, is a different story for a different day, and I have not decided yet whether I need it. What I know about my sister is this: she is the person she learned to be inside our family, the same way I am the person I learned to be inside our family, and I cannot unknow that, and it changes how much anger I can sustain. It does not mean what she did was okay. It means I understand the conditions under which she became someone who could do it. That is different from forgiveness. It is more like context. I am still working out what to do with it. Have you ever been in a situation where you knew something was wrong and the people around you who should have known better kept insisting it was fine, and you started to wonder if you were the unreasonable one? Have you ever been the person in your family who is always fine, so reliably fine that nobody checks? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time because what happens next is the part I've been building toward this whole time. What happens next is smaller than you might be expecting, and I want to warn you about that because people who listen to stories like this sometimes want a big resolution, a confrontation, a moment where the truth comes out loudly and everyone has to reckon with it all at once. That is not what happened. What happened was quiet, the way things are when they are real. About 3 weeks after I sat at my parents' kitchen table with the banana bread and the note, my mother called me on a Wednesday evening. She said, "Nora, I want to take you to dinner, just us." I said, "Okay." She said, "Anywhere you want." I said, "I want to go back to curate." There was a pause. She said, "I will make the reservation." We went on a Friday in June, the two of us. We sat at a table by the window and we ordered the croquetas de jamon, which were exactly as good as they had been in October of 2021, and my mother had a glass of white wine and I had a glass of water, and we talked about things that were real. Not catch-up conversation, not how is work and how is the apartment. We talked about her mother, my grandmother Opal, who had died in 2018, and what it had been like to watch her go, and how my mother still sometimes picked up the phone to call her before she remembered. We talked about what it had been like for my mother growing up as the younger sister of someone who took up a lot of space, her own sister Patty, and I watched her face while she talked about that, and I did not say anything about the symmetry of it because she was already seeing it herself. At some point, she said, "I have made mistakes with you girls, and I want to say that directly." She was looking at the table when she said it. She said, "I always thought that you were okay, that you would always be okay." She said, "I think I used that belief as a reason not to look too carefully." I said, "I know." She looked up. I said, "I also know you love me. Those things are both true." She looked at me for a moment, this look I could not entirely read, and then she said, "When did you get so sensible?" And I said, "Probably around the time I figured out no one else was going to be." We stayed at that restaurant for 2.5 hours. The server brought us dessert we did not order, which is apparently something they do sometimes, a small complimentary thing, chocolate something very rich. My mother pushed it toward me. I pushed it back toward the center. We shared it. I want to go back to the first version I told you, the version where my sister had a panic attack and my parents went to be with her and I ate dinner with my friends. I told you that version because that is the version I lived inside for a year and a half, and I think it is important to say that living inside a story is different from knowing it. You can know something is wrong and still not know what to do with that knowing, and the gap between those two things can last for a very long time. I lived in that gap. I was comfortable enough in it, in the way that you can be comfortable in a space that is too small for you because you have been there long enough that you have stopped noticing the edges. Finding that note was not the thing that changed everything. I want to be clear about that too because I think I implied it was, and that is not quite right. Finding the note was the thing that made it impossible to keep choosing the comfortable smallness. It was evidence that I had not misread the room, that the thing I had almost noticed on October 14th, 2021 was real, and that knowing it was real meant I was responsible for deciding what to do with it. Hearing Mandy at the wedding was the thing that made it urgent. Because Mandy knowing meant other people knew, which meant the story of that night existed in my family in a version that was more accurate than the version I had been given, and I was the only one still living inside the inaccurate version. That was intolerable to me. Not the betrayal itself, not anymore, not after 3 years. The being the last to know, that was the part I could not leave alone. I am a logistics coordinator. I track systems. I notice when a piece of information is missing from the chain and everything downstream is compensating for its absence. That is what I had been doing, compensating, filling in the gap with goodwill and benefit of the doubt, and the kind of love that does not require accuracy to function. It is a real kind of love, I am not dismissing it. But it had been costing me something I had not been accounting for, and when I finally put it on the ledger, it was more than I expected. Here is what I have now, 5 months after the wedding and 2.5 years after the dinner. I have the note folded in the inside pocket of my laptop bag where it has lived for 2 years. I do not know if I will keep it indefinitely. I do not know if there will come a time when I need it for something or a time when it just seems like a thing I no longer need to carry. Right now it feels important to have it, not as evidence, as a record, a way of saying this happened, I know it happened, I was not crazy. I have a relationship with my mother that is different from what it was before that Saturday in May. Not better in the uncomplicated way that word usually means. Different, more accurate. There is something in it now that was not there before, which is that she knows I know, and I know she knows I know, and we have stopped pretending around the edges of that. There is a kind of ease in that, actually. Something that was always slightly in the way is not in the way anymore. I have a relationship with my father that has not changed very much because my father is a person who processes things slowly and who shows up by showing up. And in the past 5 months, he has called me every Sunday at 11 a.m., which is not something he ever did before, and we talk for about 20 minutes about whatever is happening, and he never mentions October 14th, 2021, and I never mention it either, and that is fine. That is who he is. I can work with that. I have a relationship with Delaney that is exactly what it was before, which is to say it is the surface of something, warm and a little careful, maintained by mutual agreement not. To press too hard, I do not know if that will change. I think it might. I think there will probably be a conversation at some point that I have not been ready for yet. When I am ready for it, I will have it. I am not in a hurry. I have learned that being in a hurry with these things does not serve anyone. I have Bex, who I called after the Saturday morning with my parents and who said, "How do you feel?" And I said, "Lighter, actually." And she said, "Good." And we were quiet on the phone together for a moment in the easy way that you can be quiet with someone you have known for a long time. I have the memory of sitting in my car in the parking area at Mark Tree Vineyard with string lights glowing through a tent wall and reading a piece of paper in the dark. I have that moment as a kind of marker. Before that and after that, the before was the life I had built inside a story that was not entirely true. The after is this: a Tuesday in May, a Saturday morning, banana bread nobody ate, a note on a kitchen table, my mother's face. She will be fine, written in blue ink on rooster print notepaper. She is fine. I actually am. But I know it now because I chose it, not because no one thought to ask. I have been thinking a lot lately about the particular kind of people who get called reliable, capable, the one you do not have to worry about. I know a lot of women who have been called those things, and what I have noticed is that behind the reliability is almost always a person who learned very young that no one was going to show up for the fragile version of them, so they stopped being fragile or they stopped being visibly fragile, which is not the same thing. They became competent instead. They got good at solving problems before anyone else noticed there was a problem. And the people around them said, "See, she is fine, she is always fine," and it was true in the way that you can train something to be true, and it was also not true at all. I am not sure what to do with that observation except to sit with it. I am still sitting with it. The croquettes de jamon at Curate are still the best thing I have ever eaten. I have been back twice since the dinner with my mother, once with Bex and once by myself on a Friday after work, sitting at the bar with a glass of water and the small noise of a restaurant around me. I ordered the croquettes and I ate them and I sat there for a while and it was quiet inside me, the kind of quiet that is not empty but that has some room in it. That is the whole story, or most of it. The parts I am still working through are not mine to tell yet, and maybe they never will be, but what I have told you is true, and I have told it as straight as I know how, and the places where I got it wrong I have tried to catch myself and go back. She will be fine. She is. End of script. Word count target 13,000 plus words. Character count target 50,000 plus characters. Pattern 4, the reluctant truth teller. Channel com drama stories. Narrator Nora Ellen Whitfield, 28, Logistics Coordinator Asheville, NC. Expanded sections. Actually, wait, I skipped something. I told you about the breakfast at Early Girl Eatery the morning after my birthday. I told it in about 4 sentences and moved past it, and that is not the right amount of attention to give it, because what happened at that breakfast was one of those things that seems small and is not small. We sat down. I ordered the shrimp and grits, which is something I always get there, and my father ordered his scrambled eggs, and my mother ordered the avocado toast, and Delaney was not there. She had not been invited, or she had begged off, or she was sleeping late, I do not know which. I remember being aware of the chair beside me being empty and thinking, at least someone made a decision about the geometry of this. Because if Delaney had been sitting there with her dark hair and her easy presence, performing remorse the way she performs things, I do not think I would have been able to stay sitting down. My mother said, "Delaney wanted to come this morning, but she thought you might need some space." I said, "That is thoughtful." I did not know at the time if I meant that sarcastically. Looking back, I do not think I did. I think I genuinely could not tell whether it was thoughtful or strategic. Both can be true at the same time. I have known for a long time that my sister is a person who can do a thoughtful thing for strategic reasons and a strategic thing with genuine feeling, and trying to parse which is an exercise that does not serve me, so I have mostly stopped. My father put his fork down and said, "Your mother and I feel terrible about last night, Nora." I said, "Okay." He looked at me. I said, "I am not being dismissive. I mean, okay, I hear that you feel terrible." My mother said we should have been there. She said it looking at the table. I said you were worried about Delaney. I understand that. And then I picked up my coffee and I looked out the window at the street because I did not want to look at their faces while I said the next part, and what I said was, "I just would like to understand sometime when you are both ready to talk about it what threshold Delaney's emergency has to reach before my birthday becomes something you stay for. I am not asking right now. I am just asking that we eventually have that conversation." My mother made a sound that was not quite a word. My father said, "That is fair." He reached across the table and put his hand on my forearm. His hand was warm and heavy, and he kept it there for a moment. That gesture cost him something. I could feel that. He is not a demonstrative man, and I did not pull away. We ate our breakfast. The cardinal did not come to the windowsill this time, or if it did, I was not watching. The morning was gray in that specific October gray way that Asheville gets, low clouds and the smell of something cool coming in. My father paid the check. My mother said, "Let us do something nice for your birthday soon, you pick the thing." And I said, "Okay," and we went to our separate cars. I sat in my car for a minute before I started it. "I thought you said let us eventually have that conversation." You said it. You put it on the table and they both heard it, and they did not say what conversation. They knew exactly what conversation, which means they have been aware that the conversation needed to happen, which means they have been avoiding it. I filed that. I started my car and drove home and put my keys on the hook inside my door and stood in my entryway for a moment. My apartment is small. Studio, technically, though the building calls it a junior one-bedroom because of the way the closet is built out. It suits me. There is exactly enough space for the things I need, and I know where everything is. I stood in the entryway and I felt the smallness of it as a good thing, a thing I had chosen, a space that was mine and organized according to my own logic. And then I went and made myself another coffee, even though I had just had one at the restaurant, because I needed something to do with my hands. I thought about calling Bex. I thought about it and then did not do it. Bex would have listened and she would have said the right things, and I would have felt heard and warm, and then I would have hung up and still been exactly where I was. Sometimes hearing the right things just makes you feel the texture of what is wrong more clearly. I was not ready for that. I put on a podcast, I cleaned my bathroom. I watered my plants, a pothos and two small succulents on the kitchen windowsill, and I stood at the window looking at the street below for a few minutes while the water drained. The gray morning had gotten grayer. I thought about Curate and the croquetas and Bex and Travis being polite about it and Jill saying, "Oh gosh," in the empty chair. I thought about a table set for 6 and 4 of us in it. I thought about the lemon ricotta cake that the restaurant brings out as a complimentary birthday dessert, which I had not gotten, which was not a tragedy, which was also just the kind of small specific thing that stacks up over time into something that matters. That was October 15th, 2021, the morning after. And then life kept going, the way it always does, not waiting for you to finish processing. Work was busy. One of our major vendors had a contract renewal coming up in November, and the numbers were not what they should be, and I spent most of October in spreadsheets and phone calls. I saw Bex at a fall festival in the River Arts District, and we walked around for a couple of hours and ate something on a stick, and she asked about the birthday dinner, and I gave her the short version, and she said, "I am sorry," and I said, "It is fine," and I meant it at the time. I really did mean it at the time. I called Delaney the following week to check in because that is what I do. I check in. It is a habit so deep it does not feel like a choice. She answered on the third ring. She said she was feeling much better, thank you for asking, and she said she had been feeling so guilty about my birthday. She said, "Nora, I would have been so much happier if it had just been a regular Thursday." She said that, a regular Thursday. I registered the phrasing and said nothing about it. I said, "How are your panic attacks in general? Are you seeing someone?" She said she had been talking to her therapist about it. She said sometimes they just come out of nowhere. I said I understand. I did not say, "I have been having a persistent low-level anxiety since I was about 9 years old that I have never told anyone about because there was not a space in our family for that information." I did not say that. I said I understand. And we talked for about 15 more minutes about her job and a guy she had briefly dated and then not dated. And I said, "Glad you are feeling better," and we hung up. This is the thing I need to say about that phone call. I believed her mostly. I believed in the panic attacks as a real phenomenon in her life. I still believe that. What I stopped believing eventually was that they were not also strategic sometimes, or that the timing of them was ever entirely innocent. That is a complicated thing to believe about your sister. It required me to hold two pictures of her at the same time, the person who genuinely struggles and the person who knows exactly when and how to struggle most effectively. Both pictures are accurate. I spent a long time wanting one of them to be wrong, wanting it to be either fine, she is just a person with anxiety, or she is deliberately manipulative, pick one. But it is not one, it has never been one. She is both, and the people around her who love her have never required her to distinguish between them, and that has allowed both to flourish equally. November happened, December happened. We had Thanksgiving at my parents' house, the four of us, with my grandmother Opal's old roasting pan that my mother still uses every year because she says nothing else gets the skin right. Delaney brought a pie. I brought a salad and a bottle of wine. My father made his green bean thing with the fried onion topping that is technically from a can and everyone pretends it is not. We sat around the table and it was warm and ordinary, and I felt the ordinary warmth of it genuinely, not performed. I am capable of that, of being present in the good things even when the complicated things have not resolved. It is one of the few things I have always been able to do. After dinner, Delaney and I did the dishes together while my parents watched football in the other room. She washed and I dried, which is how it has always been. I do not remember when that division was established, but it has been that way since we were children. She was talking about something, a work thing, and her hands were in the soapy water, and I was standing beside her with a dish towel, and I thought, "I love you." I thought it clearly. Not in spite of everything, not with an asterisk. Just "I love you" plainly, the way you love someone who is woven into your history so thoroughly that their absence would leave a hole in the shape of a person. That thought made me sad in a way that surprised me. I dried the dishes. I put them away in the places I still knew from childhood, the plates on the second shelf, the glasses on the right, the good serving bowls up high where you need a step stool. Delaney finished washing and dried her hands on the dish towel I was holding and said, "Thanks, Nor," and I said, "Of course." We went and sat with my parents. My father was asleep in his chair. That was Thanksgiving 2021. I need to go back now to something I skipped earlier, because I mentioned finding the shoebox in March of 2023, and I glossed over the moment of actually reading the note. And that was not an accident, that was me protecting myself from having to describe it in detail, and I am going to try to describe it in detail now because it matters. The stepladder was a four-step aluminum one that my parents have had since before I was born. It lives in the hallway closet and gets brought out for light bulbs and high shelves. I was on the third step when I pulled the shoebox down and the lid shifted and the cards fanned out. I caught most of them. A couple fell to the floor and I climbed down and picked them up. The folded piece of paper was wedged between two cards and it came out with them. I recognized the notepaper immediately. My mother has kept those pads by the kitchen phone for as long as I can remember. The roosters are small and rust-colored and they march across the top of each page in a row. She buys them at a shop in Biltmore Village, or she used to. I do not know if the shop is still there. I unfolded the paper standing on the floor of my childhood bedroom with a card that said "To Delaney on your birthday" in one hand and the notepad page in the other. The handwriting is my mother's. She writes in a script that is very neat but slightly compressed, like she is conserving space. The note was, "D, this is the plan for Thursday. Dad and I park at the Rankin garage at 6:30. You call at 6:45. We come to you. 30 minutes, then we say Nora will understand. She always does. Dinner can go forward. We will come in for dessert. Dinner, yes. Parking garage close. Should work. She will be fine." The Rankin garage. My mother was specific about the parking garage. They had chosen the Rankin garage on Rankin Avenue, which is 3 blocks from Curate, which is why they were close enough to respond quickly when Delaney called. They had chosen it because it was close. They had been in that garage at 6:30, parked, ready to respond, while I was standing at the bar at Curate waiting for my family to arrive. I read the note 4 times. The fourth time I read it slowly, one phrase at a time, the way I read the fine print on contracts. Dad and I park at the Rankin garage at 6:30, so my father knew. He has said he did not know about the note, and I believe him about the note specifically, but he knew there was a plan. He was in the parking garage. He is in this sentence. Dad and I, we, both of them. You call at 6:45. Delaney was told when to call, not if she felt bad, not if she was struggling, when at 6:45, 15 minutes before my reservation. Nora will understand. My mother was not describing a hope, she was describing a fact she had already decided. She will be fine. I stood in that bedroom for 4 minutes. I have already told you that. What I did not tell you is that during those 4 minutes, I went through approximately 12 different versions of what I was about to do. I was going to go downstairs and put the note on the kitchen table. I was going to take a photograph of it and text it to my father. I was going to fold it up and throw it away and never think about it again. I was going to call Delaney right then and read it to her. I was going to finish cleaning the room and go home and open a bottle of wine and process it alone. I cycled through all of these options in about 4 minutes, which is a speed I am not proud of, because it suggests how quickly I can reach a decision that does not actually feel like a decision, that is really just an avoidance that looks like patience. I folded the note, I put it in my pockets. That was not a decision to do nothing, that was a decision to wait until I understood what I was deciding. Those are different, I need that distinction. I came down from the stepladder. My mother came in with the towels. I said almost done and I meant it. I taped up 3 boxes for Goodwill and put the watercolor set aside to take home, and I carried everything to the car in 2 trips, and my mother stood in the driveway saying, "You do not have to take all that right now," and I said, "It is fine, I have room." I drove home, I parked, I sat in my car for 11 minutes. I know it was 11 minutes because I was watching the clock on my dashboard in that specific way where you notice the time and then notice it again. When you finally move. I thought about calling my mother from the car. I thought she is still at the house, she is probably putting the linen closet back together, I could call her right now. But I did not know what I would say, I did not have a shape for the conversation yet. And without a shape for it, I would end up in the middle of something I had not prepared for, and my mother is a person who, when she is surprised and scared, reaches for a particular kind of emotion that pulls other people toward managing her rather than saying the thing they needed to say. I have managed her through 4 dozen difficult conversations in my life. I was not going to manage her through this one. So I waited. 2 years, give or take, waiting is not always passive. Sometimes it is the longest active thing you do. I want to talk about the birthday before the birthday because I think it matters for understanding how the 25th landed the way it did. My 24th birthday was the one I thought was going to be the good one. I had just gotten the job at Mission Health, my first professional role after 2 years of lower-level administrative work, and I felt for the first time in a long time like I was becoming the version of myself I had been working toward. I had moved into my apartment on Kimberly Avenue. I had bought my first piece of grown-up furniture, a second-hand mid-century credenza from an estate sale on Kenilworth that I had refinished myself over 3 weekends in my parking space. I was 24 and I felt, in the specific way you feel things at 24 when everything is assembling into a shape you recognize, like things were going well. My mother had offered to host a birthday dinner at the house. My father's specialty is grilled salmon and he had offered to make it. I had said yes. Delaney had said she would come. 2 days before the dinner, Delaney called and said she was not going to be able to make it. She said she was overwhelmed, her words, overwhelmed, and that she needed a quiet weekend. She said, "I hope that is okay." I said it was okay. I remember sitting at my kitchen table after that call and looking at my credenza across the room, the credenza I had spent 3 weekends refinishing, and thinking she is not coming to my birthday dinner. Not for an emergency this time, not for any particular reason, just because she needed a quiet weekend. I thought that clearly and precisely, and then I set it down and went to my parents' house and had the salmon, and my father put too much lemon on it the way he always does, and my mother made a small cake and it was fine. She sent me a gift a week later, a soft cardigan from a boutique in West Asheville that I actually liked, which is not something she always achieves. She tends to buy things that reflect her taste more than mine. I wore it. It is still in my closet. I do not think about it when I put it on, I just wear it. That is the 24th. The 25th is what I have been describing. The 26th was just me and Bex and Travis and a new restaurant that had opened on Lexington Avenue. Nothing elaborate, just dinner. And it was exactly what I needed it to be, which is to say it was small and warm and nobody left. I am a person who remembers birthdays, I always have been. Not because I am sentimental exactly, but because I think they matter as a unit of time, as a marker, as an annual check-in with yourself about who you are and whether that person is someone you plan to become. I make a point of remembering other people's birthdays too. I have my parents in my phone with a 2-day advance reminder. I have Delaney's. I have Bex and Travis and Jill and my cousin Terry and 4 other people I care about enough to want to remember. I do not know if anyone else has mine in their phone with a reminder. I have never checked. I have wondered occasionally late at night in the way you wonder things you do not really want the answer to, but I have not checked. The note said she will be fine. I want to stay with that sentence for one more moment before I let it go. The sentence is not wrong exactly. I am fine, I am genuinely fine, but the sentence was written as a permission slip, as a thing my mother wrote to herself to allow herself to do what she was going to do anyway. She knew I would not be fine in the way she wrote it. She knew I would feel the absence. She knew it would matter to me. She wrote she will be fine not because she believed it in the deep sense, but because she needed to believe it enough to keep moving. And what I have had to decide in the 2+ years since I read it is whether I am going to be angry at her for that or whether I am going to try to understand the pressure she was under. The pressure of loving 2 daughters who needed different things. The impossibility of that, the way. It forces you to make choices that are not really choices so much as a ranking of needs you have decided in advance. I have decided not to be angry. That is not a moral achievement. I want to be clear about that. It is not that I rose above it or that I am better than the anger. It is that I looked at the anger carefully and I decided it was not the most useful thing I could carry. It is still there underneath in the way things are when you have not resolved them but you have decided to set them to the side. I know where it is. I can find it if I need it. I am just not leading with it. That feels like the most honest thing I can say about where I am. Here is the last thing, the one I almost left out. The Saturday morning at my parents' house. After I put the note on the table and my mother said I am so sorry and my father said I did not know about the note, after all of that, after the banana bread and the refrigerator sound and the feeling of something expanding in my chest. I was getting ready to leave. I had my jacket on and my bag on my shoulder and I was standing in the kitchen doorway and my mother was still at the table and she said, "Nora." I stopped. She said, "I want to ask you something and you can say no." I waited. She said, "Is there anything I can do now to make it right?" She said it simply, not dramatically, not with the particular quiver she uses when she wants something from you, just plainly like someone asking a real question. I thought about it. I actually thought about it, stood there in the doorway and thought about it, which is what I told you I was going to say I do more often. I said, "Come to the next one." She said, "I will." I said, "And do not bring Delaney if she is not feeling well, but come." My mother looked at me for a moment. There was something in her face that I could not entirely name, a kind of recognition, maybe, of what I was actually saying, which was, "I do not need you to fix the past, I need you to show up in the future. Those are different requests, and most people ask for the wrong one." She said, "We will be there." My 28th birthday is in October, 3 months from now. I have not made a reservation yet. I am thinking about going back to Curate because the croquetas are still the best thing I have ever eaten and because I am not someone who avoids places because something hard happened near them. But I might try somewhere new. I have not decided. What I know is that the table will have the right number of people at it. And no one will be sitting in an empty parking garage 3 blocks away waiting for a signal. That is the whole story, that is all of it. The version I believed and the version that was true and the version I am living in now, which is neither of those exactly, which is its own thing. A thing I am still in the middle of. She is fine. I chose that. End of complete script. Final expansion, scenes and reflection. I want to go back to something I glossed over because I think I owe it more space. The night itself, the actual dinner at Curate on October 14th, 2021. I had been looking forward to that dinner for 6 weeks. That sounds like a small thing, but it is not a small thing. I am not a person who looks forward to a lot of things in a sustained way. I get excited about things and then the excitement quiets and I become practical about them. But Curate had been sitting in my mind as a point I was moving toward, something I had chosen for myself, something I had organized around my own preference, not around what was easy or convenient for other people. I had made the reservation in late August. I had called ahead to let them know it was a birthday. I had chosen the time carefully so it would not be too early or too late for anyone. I had thought about what I was going to wear. I had bought a dress from a small boutique on Broadway, a deep green one with a square neckline because I almost never buy things for myself that are not practical and I thought my 25th birthday was a reasonable occasion to do something impractical. The dress hung on the back of my bathroom door for 3 weeks before October 14th. I had looked at it in the mornings when I was brushing my teeth, not obsessively. Just noticed it there and thought, that is the birthday dress. I wore it to the restaurant. I sat at the bar in the birthday dress and waited for my family. I ordered a glass of white wine. The bartender was friendly and talked to me about the menu, and I listened and I thought, they are coming, they are probably parking right now. Delaney is probably complaining about the garage prices the way she always does about parking. My father is probably saying it is fine, Dell, and my mother is probably agreeing with both of them. 6:44, my mother's name on my phone screen. I set my wine glass down, I answered. When I walked to the table where Bex and Travis were already seated, I had the glass in my hand and my phone in my pocket, and I sat down and I put the napkin in my lap. In the small, normal motion of doing that, the folding of the white napkin, the placement of it felt suddenly very precise, like I was performing a task that required concentration. I focused on it. I pressed the napkin flat against my lap. Bex said, "Where is everyone?" I said my parents had to go to Delaney. She had a panic attack. Travis said, "Oh no." I said, "She is going to be okay." Bex looked at me with a look I know well, which is the look she uses when she is deciding whether to push or to let me set the terms. She has known me for 11 years. She has a very accurate read of when I want to talk and when I want to be treated normally. She looked at me for about 2 seconds and then she said, "What are you going to order?" And I said, "Definitely the croquetas," and we opened our menus. That was the decision she made for me, to let me be normal. I was grateful for it then and I am grateful for it now. Jill arrived and sat down and I explained again and she said, "Oh gosh," and I said, "She's going to be fine," and Jill said, "Well, happy birthday, Nora," and I said, "Thank you," and she poured herself a glass of water. 4 people at a table for six, 2 empty chairs. I did not look at them directly. I looked at the menu and I looked at Bex and I looked at the restaurant around us, which was full and warm and lit in the specific amber way of good restaurants at dinner, and I thought, this place is beautiful, I chose well. When the croquetas arrived, I ate one immediately. I do not usually eat things the second they arrive. I usually let things cool. But I picked one up while it was still steaming and I ate it, and it was exactly what I had hoped it would be, crispy and warm and salty and a little yielding inside, and I thought, this is a good thing, this specific thing is good, and I let that be true alongside everything else. The birthday cake, I should tell you about the birthday cake. At the end of the meal, the server brought out a small lemon ricotta cake with a single candle in it and set it in front of me and said, "From the restaurant, happy birthday." Bex and Jill and Travis said happy birthday, and I blew out the candle and the 4 of us ate the cake, and it was very good, airy and bright and lemon in the way that cuts through the richness of everything that came before it. My mother texted at that exact moment. 7:23. Delaney is feeling better, so relieved. Sorry we missed the reservation. Can we do breakfast tomorrow? I read the text and put my phone face down on the table. Travis was saying something about a restaurant he had been to in Charleston, and Bex was asking him a follow-up question, and Jill was eating the last of the cake, and I sat there with my phone face down and the candle wax hardening on the little cake plate, and I thought, she texted during the dessert. I thought she knew we would be at dessert at 7:23. She timed it so she would not interrupt the meal but would catch us before we left. I thought, that is very organized for an emergency. I did not say any of that out loud. I turned my phone over and typed, "So glad, see you tomorrow, love you," and I sent it. And then I looked up and Travis was asking if anyone wanted the last of his pinkso, and I said, "I will take it," and I did, and it was fine. That is the whole dinner. I have told it completely now. I want to say something about the dress. I wore it home and I hung it back up on the hook inside my closet door, not the bathroom door where it had been for 3 weeks, the closet door, which is where clothes live after you have worn them. I stood in my bedroom in my apartment and I looked at it there on the hook and I thought, I wore that to my birthday dinner. That is what happened in that dress. That is the story that dress has now. I kept it, I still have it. I wore it to a work event last spring and someone said, "That color is great on you," and I said, "Thank you, I got it a while ago," and that was all. The dress does not know what happened in it. The dress is just a dress. I am the one who knows. The restaurant review I left on Google for Curate is still there. I left it about 2 weeks after the dinner, 5 stars, and in the review I said the croquetas de jamon were exceptional and the service was warm and the ambience made you feel like the evening was worth the effort to dress for. I wrote that review sitting at my kitchen table on a Tuesday night in late October, and I meant every word of it. The restaurant did not do anything wrong. I wanted to make sure that was on the record somewhere. I went back to look at my own review once, about 6 months ago, and I read it and it struck me as a very specific kind of document, a record left by a version of me who had just had a difficult evening and was choosing to evaluate the parts of it that were good. I thought you were doing that then too, the cataloging, the keeping track of what went right alongside what went wrong. That is a useful habit. It is also sometimes a way of not sitting still with the thing that went wrong. I am working on knowing the difference. There are things I will not be able to fix. The 25th birthday will always be what it was. The note will always have been written. The parking garage will always have been chosen in advance. These are facts in the past tense now, and past tense facts do not move. What moves is me. What moves is the distance I travel away from the center of a thing that hurt me, not away from the truth of it, but away from the sharp center of it, out toward the edges where it is possible to see it as a whole and to think about it without the physical sensation of it being right there in my chest. I am further from the sharp center than I was. I am not all the way out at the edges yet. I think that is honest. I am trying to be honest about every part of this, including the parts where I have not finished processing, including the parts where the emotion still lives in my body in specific places, a tightness behind the sternum when I think about the parking garage and the exact time they chose, a loosening in my shoulders that happened in my mother's kitchen when she said I am so sorry and I believed her. Those physical facts are as true as the note and the dinner and the shoebox. I want to include them. My name is Nora Ellen Whitfield. I am 28 years old, and I spent 3 years being the only person in my family who was carrying the full truth of what happened on my 25th birthday, and then I set it down where everyone could see it, and the world did not end, and my mother made banana bread, and I kept the dress. That is the story. A complete end. Total word count 13,000 plus words slash 65,000 plus characters. Pattern 4, the reluctant truth teller.